Okay, let us continue. We are on the last page of the text material, and we're going to be a little bit low practical here because we are going to look into some of the ideas of how can we actually do this, as in kind of when you have an idea, how do you then put it into fruition? How do you make it happen? How do you unfold your idea? And I want to put it I want to make it very clear that if you ask me, do I follow this method step by step? No, not really. But since I am going to give you some ideas of how you can do it, I have made it for the purpose. And then I will say, well, how do I have made it? I kind of looked into how do I do it? Because what I do is it's per intuition. It's kind of, I wake up in the morning and then I kind of get this idea, or it's been implanted in me during that time. You choose yourself. But before, when we said back in 2016 or 2014 or whenever, and I kind of say, well, did I ever actually have an idea that was my own? And what do I mean with that? Well, once I began let's do a little bit historical context here, because when I began, in 1999, I did get the call. I kind of called it the trumpet of Gabriel, because that's kind of how I felt. I felt this sound in my head that was just kind of going, it was a soundless sound as it is, because it was with my inner hearing. And I felt this kind of calling, I heard this boom inside of me. And then I just knew, yeah, this is now. And again, as you recall from my other material, when I was a kid until I reached my teens, around 13 or so, I was quite observant. I had this old soul traits, this kind of sensitivity, but not really knowing what it was. And when I was 13, I had a series of dreams, the one with the old wise man. I also had the opposition of it, and tapping into some of the underworld forces. I had already then kind of experienced stuff that others did not see. I knew that I had to keep it for myself. And then at the same time, I was also this kind of not understanding it and being frightful of it, because you kind of carry that burden on your own, right? You can't go and say to your mom, I had a dream about the devil, right? But I kind of wrote to one psychologist that were working with archetypes, and he was actually I mentioned that he was kind enough to respond to me as a kind of, which was enough for me. He didn't just leave me hanging. He actually responded in a nice and kind way that made me feel, okay, perhaps I'm not completely lost it or what have you. But I was dealing with these things on my own the best way I could. I read a lot of books. I submerged in books, whether it was romantic books or it was thrillers or it was kind of, books that had a storyline, a narrative that were created, science fiction or what have you. But I was diving into different things where I kind of escaped what was going on in my head. I was drawing a lot. I used to draw things. I used to write poems, and I also listened to a lot of music. And then I would go out my bike and drive around nature, do whatever I could to just not focus on what was going on in my head and what I was seeing, just trying to get through day by day. And at the same time also were afraid to fall asleep, had all of these weird dreams and would wake up in terror and had this dark figure beside my bed. And so it was a little bit, looking back, I kind of, not that when I look back at how did I deal with it, it was on and off as it is now. And I just learned that this is just my reality and not thinking much about it. This is the weird mechanism, right? You go in and say, well, this is my reality. And then you just deal with it. You just learn that that's how it is, instead of going all sorts of weird directions, and still knowing I couldn't share that with anyone, because I already tried to share that I was being bullied at school and I had stomach ache, and I went to my grandparents during summertime. That was not good either, but at least I met my uncle there and he was kind to me. So I had these little glimpses of kindness in all of this weird scenario that I grew up within. It's kind of just knowing this is different, but I can't share this, because if I share this, they might lock me away. So I was looking for answers other places. So, plus this whole kind of being bullied at school, I remember we had that meeting back home when my school teacher came, and I could hear, yeah, they don't know what this is about. They don't know how to solve it. Not that I thought that explicitly, as in a kind of a 10-year-old does not think that way, but I just knew it subconscious. I just knew kind of, yeah, and the grown-ups are not going to help me. I need to figure this one out myself. And that laid the foundation of whatever I would come up with would be, I need to figure this one out myself. So that's the foundation from my childhood, as in kind of looking around, looking at the humans, looking at my parents, looking at the teachers, looking at what's going on, look at the ones in my class in primary school or elementary school or a grade school, call it whatever you want to call it, up to 10th grade. I just knew I just need to endure this. I just need to get through this. I just need to figure out how to get through this, as a kind of not explicitly thinking that, because a kid does not, but it was there. It was in the background. It was something that just ran as a subcurrent. I need to figure this one out myself. And that's been a kind of primary code for me. That's my default mechanism. Solving it myself, finding the answers, figure out what it is, and then deal with it on my own and find solutions so it would go away. Whatever happened, it would go away or it would turn into something else. And at the same time, being enormously sad. Very miserable. And I actually figured out a while back why I was that sad. It actually had to do with the original soul, let's put it that way, that used to inhabit this body. I always thought that she kind of was gone with the whole walk-in scenario when I was 4 and I was quote unquote drowning, which is of course where they interfered with time. The body drowned, but it didn't drown because they halted time and did this interception. But actually, the heart of that original soul was not freed. It was actually tied to the underworld. And that's why I had these underworld experiences. They were technically not mine. They were hers. So this is some of the things I've just dealing with recently, actually here in the end of 2022. So that's interesting how long things can go on until we have cleared all of the layers. So my work has been, and just to put this in context, so you say, well, what does that have to do with the creational processes and hybrid projects? Well, it has to do with who we are foundationally. How do you deal with challenges in life? How do you deal with projects in life? How do you deal with your own life? How do you deal with things that are challenging? How do you deal with things that challenge you to do something extraordinary? Are you relying on others? Are you always looking for others to solve it for you? Are you always looking for others to assist you in what you're doing in your projects? Or are you this lone rider, as I have always been, that just knew, no, I have to deal with this myself? That's important to know who you are. That's a foundational trait. If you are this communicative person that needs to be in a team, well, you must acknowledge that and then find your team. If you are the lone rider, as I am, you can do everything on your own. You don't need anyone else. So that's important to know that distinction looking back. Well, how did you actually prefer living your life? Were you, as I were, secluded and retreated all the time? I always retreated. When I came home from school, I lied down on the couch, look at the sky, did a meditation where I silenced my mind. I practiced meditation as a child. Of course, we now know it's because I already practiced it in a previous life. But whether we say, well, whether it is a previous life or it is an insertion to keep my molecular state low or whatever it is, these are some of the challenges that each and one have in different variations. So again, not saying that my life is similar to your life, because it isn't. Each and one of us have our own timeline of work to do, our own context to work within, and our own experiences, and why we are here and why we are being recirculated and why we are in this physical form. It's not identical. It is different from each and one of us. There are similarities. There are traits that we can say, yes, on a general level, there are these prohibiting technologies, alien inserted technologies, there are energetic parasites, there are the construction of the different energy fields. But how much viability you have in these fields, how hard they have been driven, how much they've been harvested, which project you're a part of, will determine how you manage yourself in life. So that's a different approach to when we do hybrid projects, and not just about having the grand idea. It is actually also psychologically and energetically and driven by factions. So there's so much more to it. That's what I mean. Do we even have a real choice, as in kind of when we wake up with ideas, are they even our own? But to go further into that little expose of things, and then moving into when I was around 20, I had the whole dip, and then I got myself back up to my own 2 feet. So I didn't have that inner drive that came in 1999, just to put it that way. So between the age of 13, where kind of the hormones kicked in, and as you know, I remember that one say, oh yeah, now I'm going to get submerged into all of this distortion and emotional stuff, not thinking that way. But I do remember standing there, and actually came after I had an unfortunate and unpleasant experience with one that called and pretended to be my mom's doctor. And he actually he was then, I'm your mom's doctor. And then said, may I ask you some questions? And I was just 13. So I said, okay. And then he began asking me, have you got breast? Have you begin to menstruate? And these kind of things sounding like a doctor. And then he began sounding weird in his voice. And then you know exactly what it was. And I hung up, and I was all panicky. And then I understood, yeah, now I'm going into that predatorious level of this reality where I'll just get submerged in all of these desires and all that perversion and all that distortion, and not thinking that explicitly. But I do recall thinking, yeah, that's the call out. That's where this one changed. That's where I now, since I am in this female body, is going to suffer because I have a vagina, which is a thing that females discover at some point. And there's no doubt when we look at my life that all of these predators have been there in the forms of men with their sexual desire. So that's also kind of a way to look at my life, as that's also been tone given, which it is for many females. The reason why I bring this up is because I actually watched yesterday a documentary that's called Hysterical about female comedians and how they are now in 2022, and with the Me Too movement, it's now being more legal to talk about this. But when I grew up, it was kind of, yeah, you just have to deal with it because that's how men are. So also the whole thing that, yes, that on business, yeah, men has the prerogative, females don't. I grew up with that. And that's for some of you youngsters out there that doesn't have that. Good for you. My daughter is completely different because I taught her otherwise. I prepared her for a man's world. So she knew what to do, but my mom did not teach me. She was old school, right? She was from 43. So she was all of this hippie movement and whatever. And she was in this kind of, trying to be feministic, but not really trying to prove her own free sexuality. And she just blew it completely. She didn't know when to stop. Anyway, so that's another angle. So that's what I grew up with as well, saying, well, females that have tried to gain their liberation, it's not about sexual liberation. They might feel that is what it is. It's part of it, but it's so much more. And I always felt this, if I only had been a male, then I would have all the possibilities. So that has also been a driver in me, this kind of looking at that injustice. Why? Because they have a dick. They're allowed to do whatever. And because I have a vagina, I'm not allowed to do whatever. So that was also tone given in my choice in life. And then have that feeling of injustice, the feeling of sadness, the feeling of injustice, and the feeling of actually not really looking at my own gender and say, yeah, I can't really use what you are, because females, they were just hunting guys and they were just all about their partners and love and falling in love. And even though I fell into the trap as well, and I've had some really good relationships, and I'm not going to say I'm never going to have relationships again or whatever, but the whole point is that understanding of the construction and the programs and the institutions that were around a female or a woman were something I felt very uncomfortable in. Similarly, when I went out working, trying to find my place there, and also got married, and I was sad and unhappy throughout it all because I was forced into models of existence where I simply did not fit. I did not fit as a wife. I did not fit as a partner with the general type of male that were base program male. Did not fit at all. It made me so unhappy. I tried to shut down all of my emotions regarding it, but it didn't work. I could do it for so long. Then I felt I had to downsize myself. I had to be something I was not. I had to express something I didn't feel. This whole kind of feeling in love fluctuated all depending on what was going on. So it was not always present. I now know it's quite normal, but I felt, compared to my mom and my sister, always, oh, I'm so in love. And they were in love all the time. And I kind of in the beginning felt, oh, that's exciting. But eventually I just felt sad when I fell in love. It's just kind of, oh, fuck, now I'm falling in love again. So my whole way was different, including when I got pregnant. It's kind of, I got an alien inside my stomach. So the whole perspective of reality was always different, was off all the time. I could never really just submerge myself into the base program, forget myself there. It was always, when I tried, I ended up being depressive and sad, and I felt trapped, and I felt I was drowning, and I couldn't breathe, and I felt claustrophobic, and I felt that whatever was in me was too big for my body. So this is also being a little bit honest about how have I felt throughout my life. So you kind of, those of you who are having these feelings now, when you look at me now and say, oh, you just need to do this and that and whatever. Yeah, it kind of took me 40 years to get here. So this is not just something that you do overnight. This is not just something because I tell you do these steps, then you will get it. Because again, it depends on what you have gone through and how you have handled what you have gone through. I've gone through lots of ups and downs and ups and downs and ups and downs. And contrary to most people, I dealt with all of it myself. So that's given me an enormous strength. It has also given me some weaknesses, which then later on from 2016 and on, when I really began working with the people and when I began figuring out how to leave the base program, really showed me all of these weaknesses. And that's where some of the things that I had experienced that began in the 2000s, where I had these inner voices in my head. I actually began to think, have I become schizophrenic or what have you? But they showed me, and then later on it was manifested by my side as actually a kind of holographic entity that called itself Mirak, where I was this understanding from that he was actually, he began talking to me telepathically. I now know that that's probably was a gray or something, but I began getting the instructions as I grew more sensitive, and I began working with divas in nature, as I probably already did as a kid. I just didn't see them as divas, but I felt when I was out in nature, the nature spirits, they soothed me. My cat soothed me. I had one cat at a time, but there was always this protector in my cat that were with me when I was sad, that took care of me, that make my heart feel, yeah, someone actually loves me, really loves me. It was always with me. It slept with me. It protected me. It followed me to school. It was waiting for me. So when I got home from school, it came out of the bushes and meowed, and now you're home. And then we spent the day together, and it was always with me, on me, beside me, on top of me. So I had my cat. Not that I was a witch, but I had my cat to protect me. And probably the original female that used to inhabit this body, well, she was what we would call a witch today, but she was a healer, and she worked with herbs, and she was living in the woods on her own, and she was used to communicate with animals. She was used to communicate with nature. So I had that as part of my body. I already had that delivered to me. So that's what got me through this feeling of unity with nature, with animals, with life itself, not with humans, but with everything else than humans. So you kind of see that understanding as well. So that's what carried me through, as in, where did you find your strength? I found it from animals, from plants, from nature itself. I found it from life itself, teaching me this is something you need to endure. This is something you need to figure out, because eventually you will become who you're supposed to be. And I had that clairvoyant in the early 2000s that told me the same thing, that I actually had important work to do, but I had to go through a lot of stages to get there. I had to jump between different types of work, different types of understandings before I got there. So I had this kind of, which we did back in the 1990s and in the 2000s, we had these guides that actually showed us stuff. Today, not much guides, mostly, there was a Danish word there, mostly distortion or gestalts from the astral plane or what have you. And perhaps Mirak was from the astral plane, but it felt different. And why did it feel different? Because he was telling me knowledge from the other constellations, from the galaxies, from beyond our reality field. The divas, the nature spirit, told me about nature. I learned the hard way. I was working with water divas. I was working with the queen of the lake. I was working with some big oceanic beings. I was working with the tree elves. I was working with the trolls. Not really, but they were there. I had this gnome that came and activated my heart field. It literally jumped on me and pointed its long finger at my heart field. I had this huge blast that was going off. I was having this, at some point I was just kind of, I can't do this. I went to England. I had some weird experiences there. I went back home in the plane. And then there was this white lady that came and she just in my face said to me, now you have had your holiday. Now you need to begin to work. And she jumped right into my heart field and ignited me. And when I came home, my whole world began to shift because she really said, yeah, enough with that. And that was in 2011. And then I began, okay, I need to get back to work. I need to get back to what I needed to do. But you also know I had this prelude of in 2007 until 2009, where I tried to have my own practice and worked as a healer until 2010, where I just kind of, this is too hard. This is too difficult. I cannot earn enough money. That was when I was only working with Danish people. And that's where I went and did the bachelor's degree in theology. And I began that in 2010. And that's why in 2011, where I was beginning to just kind of, I'll just become a priest. I'll just do that thing. I can work with that. I'm a psychotherapist. No biggie. I can become a priest. I can get a little nice cottage somewhere out in the wilderness and a little community. I'll do that. And that's what that white lady said. Her foot in the door said, that's not going to happen. So I was pushed out of that dream. And that's where I really had to endure the remains of my studies, because that was a dream I had. I can then do that. Then I find a way to pay my bills and I don't have to be much around people. I can still help people. I wanted to help people at the time, but that's kind of where that was said. Yes, that's not going to happen. So the remaining 2 years of my studies were not that fun, because it was already said, you're now enrolled in it. And I was stubborn. I'm not going to let this one go. I need that title. I need to complete this. So at least I have that on my resume, aside from my psychotherapist and all of the other material, the courses I've done. This is the credential of society, the highest level, the university degree, right? That's where we really get our credentials. That's where we really show that we are not some kind of weird lunatics. And why did I do that? Because I had all of these innovations and experiences and what have you. So I needed to prove somehow that I was not completely off, right? So I kind of had that strategy already in place. Why did I have that strategy? Don't know. I just had it. I just knew I had to do that in spite of everything that made it enormously difficult. Teachers attacking me, falling angelics, blackbirds, what have you. That was a bit of a shit show at the university there, and not really having these good being with other student experiences and what people normally have. So it's just hard work from one end to another. But I completed it because I knew I needed it, even though I was always almost driven to the ground by it. I remember calling my sister crying and saying, I can't do this. But she said, you need to do this because you want the paper, and reminded me of it, right? And later on, unfortunately, my sister and I divided when I went to Australia. Things became very difficult for her to deal with as I came home and had all of these extra experiences, which I've talked about other places as well. So that divided us. And then my mom that died, and that was the final nail in the coffin, where she decided to, this is my mom, and I worked the other way and released the soul of my mom, and whatever's now is in my mom is not my mom, but my sister's happy. So we made that arrangement. Okay, you do that. That's your mom. And she sees herself as a lonely child now because she doesn't have a sister and she has a mom, and that's kind of how things played out. Okay. So these are again the difficulties in this line of work. So when we talk about this process I've gone through, working my way out of the base program, trying to fit in and not fitting in no matter what I did, even when I got to the point where I actually could fit in, then something would happen that would pull me out. And the inner voices that were not inner voices, I remember the first time I actually spoke to them, are you spirits? What are you? And they would say, well, from your perspective right now, you will see us as spirits, but you will learn later on that there is more to it. And always when I had a month of the time where I was studying things, the Bailey material or whatever I was studying, I always got this, do you want to continue? And I always said, yes, I want to continue. Then another set of information would come my way. And then once I'd done that, do you want to continue? And I said, yes, I want to continue. And then we're being pushed and pushed and pushed and discovering more and more levels of reality. That still happens. It still happens. That's the rotundum which I made that material of as, and kind of there is this holographic teaching system, which it is. It is the holographic teaching system that's connected to my original template. And that's interactive. So they are not spirits. They're actually what we could call programs that are connected to different types of cubes that are connected to my type of genetics and my type of energy system, which then teaches me from within what I need to do. But it's not always coherent with what needs to be done. That's some things I discovered, that there were layers in my template technology that was dysfunctional. I had to delete that. I had to let go of some grays that were not maintaining it correctly, that had been influenced by some of the brother programs and the father programs and the Lord in the Sky programs, which are technically the father programs, right? That goes with some of the Syrian cubes, and working through that. So when I say that this is the method to do, then I'm not completely just saying that's just what you need to do, because I have all of these other things going on that tells me and shows me and has shown me in my entire process that this is what you need to do. Similar when I got involved with the Colontics, I kind of got this is not for you. Now you need to pull out. So I have this inner technology that assists me in what I need to do. And some of you might have that and some of you might not have that. It depends on where you're from, why you're here. If you have been enslaved here, most of you have been stripped of that, and then you got the prohibiting technology that runs you instead. Others of you have remnants of the original technology in your higher fields, but because it's dormant and you haven't activated your higher 6 layers, then that technology is dormant as well. And then it's the 3 lower field prohibited technology that runs you. And that tells you what to do. You think that these are your own emotions. You think that these are your own thought forms, but they are not. When you wake up one thinking, oh, I really want to do this today. Well, is it actually you, or is it that prohibiting technology that follows the base program, changes and shifts and wants you to do this and that, as I talked about years ago when we had this shift of prime minister, and I woke up, go down and vote for this guy, and I was just kind of, whoa, that is so far off. I would never ever vote for that type of politics. So I woke up with it in my head, similar as a couple of years ago when we had the whole pandemic going on. I woke up one morning, go down, get vaccinated. Kind of, whoa, where did that come from? Not going to happen. But it was so strong in me, I almost felt like doing it. Isn't that interesting, right? So that's proof of influences that are beyond, not just because I kind of had a shift of heart, because absolutely not, or change of mind, as it said. But that's the understanding of what's going on. And that's some of the realizations when we begin our projects, to understand that as we work with certain ideas, we also connect to certain technologies that are running the base program. So that's when we go in and say, what is the idea we want to work with? As in, write down the main idea, use brainstorm method. And sometimes I get this, for instance, not a while back, I got this, now you're getting ready to do the soft disclosure program. And I was just kind of, okay, are you sure about that? Because what is there to actually do soft disclosure on? Everybody's been talking about it, so why do I get that? And then I can see that's because that's a program that's now running. We had the whole Pentagon and we had the whole kind of things going on. And now they need to push it further. And to be completely honest, yesterday I kind of tapped a little bit into it, and then I woke up with this very, very clear understanding. Oh yeah, that's AI. That's so AI. Similar to QAnon, that's also AI. All of these programs that are running and derailing people from unfolding their true activation potentials. So that's also important to understand. So yeah, no, that's the whole alien agenda. Not going to go there, because from my perspective, it's been played out already. So what's the next step? So that's always what I ask myself, looking at all the things that are there, as I've in my entire life submerged in all sorts of studies. One of the things I used to do as a kid, we didn't have online libraries at the time. We had physical libraries because we didn't have the internet in the 80s, right? So I would go to the library, I would come home with 5 or 6 books, and I would read a book a week, and I was just plowing through all sorts of material. Later on, in the 2000s, I was working with all sorts of different sciences. Not that I got it per se, but I was getting the main structure of the meta level of it. So I always work from the meta level of things, not the details, but the meta level, where I what is the main idea here? What is the main concept here? What is the purpose and function of it? How does it work? What is the end result if I embark on this? What does that then create of energy? not to begin with, but later on, as I began to really understand the patterns of change and how thought forms are engineered inside the collective fields of humanity, and how these are operated through different technologies that controls people's thought processes and what they think and how they feel and how they operate. I've seen how people can shift overnight because suddenly they get a new program and onward and so forth, not just because of parasitic entities that can possess and do the same thing, but actually how people can change, how people can be completely on board with whatever and then wake up another day and then they are not, as in kind of what happened and who are you, by the way, and looking at saying you're not who you were yesterday. And I have these fluctuations as well, but not to that degree where that person that actually looks at you as if, do I even know who you are? Or one guy that I was in love with, and we were going to do the whole stuff in 2004, and he was a healer, I was a healer, everything was good and fine. That was with the gnome kind of thing. And then one morning he just woke up and he just said to me, I can't do this. I just got, what? As in, yesterday you were completely on board and everything was fine. Now you just wake up something else. You say, well, that's because your subconscious had been feeling that for a while. I would say, no, it was completely from one moment to another. From one moment he was in love with me. The next moment he was absolutely not. And that was so odd. That's one of the weirdest experiences I ever had. I just said, what the fuck happened there? But I now know why, because I've seen other places, including one of the researchers. I can't remember what her name is. I never can, but there's a reason for that. Telling how, she had one of her clients that were straight, heterosexual. And then he woke up one morning and then he was suddenly homosexual. He was gay from one day to another, and he embarked on a relationship with another guy, and he lived with him for 5 or 6 years. And then he woke up one morning and said, what the fuck have I done? I'm not gay. And then he just woke up and he was completely straight again. And then he just had to leave that relationship. So these are the things that are possible. This is what's been done to us. So that's part of when we talk about creating our hybrid projects. We need to be observant of, is this really our ideas or is it something that's been imposed on us? And I would say to a large degree, I never kind of hide that from anyone. The higher awareness lifestyle, I got that when I was in Australia. I remember sitting at the pool where I was living at the time, the first time I went to Australia, and I had these grays coming in and telling me, you need to make the higher awareness lifestyle something for everybody, something that everybody can embark on. Move it out of the spirituality realm, move it out of New Age, create something new that can be used. And at that time, I was already working with the restoration programs, already trying to do that already in 2011 with the gray or the white lady that came in and some of the ideas I got there, and how I have worked with different kinds of fairy beings and nature spirits and what have you, that had taught me a lot of stuff that were not in alignment with what others were saying. When I tried to look up divas and these kind of things, it didn't add up with that, what I was seeing and what I was experiencing, what they told me. So this is where I actually work with the astral plane entities themselves, and heard, what are you saying with ghosts as well? I had plenty of experience of that. I actually also had a little bit of ghost walk-in, which was an interesting experience with a friend I had at the time. And I went to Spain and had some experiences of a secret, sisterhood that were fighting off evil forces, which is interesting, were later on made into actually a TV show, which is very, very interesting from that area as well. That was very, very interesting. Plus that these demons they actually were fighting turned out to be extraterrestrial. So that was just kind of, whoa, that is so insane. That's what I picked up for 4 years earlier. So that was really interesting. Anyway, so just to put all of these things into context, when we talk about, yes, you have the idea cycle, and that's where does the main idea come from? So put that in as in, when for me, the main ideas have come from my own energy system, the holographic teaching system. That's the progression sciences, because what the Greys in Australia told me to do was, when I kind of, once I was done down there and things collapsed, and the whole, when we talk about the template readings and the material I was doing before I went to Australia was under NOAA, so they fed me with different types of ideas, what they want, where they wanted to push things. And the students that came to me were under the NOAA projects of activation and creating new type of civilization of the fifth cycle, which also crashed and it collapsed and has changed. But in Australia, that was something else. That was the forced cycle. That was the colonizing races. That was the attempt to try and bridge them back to Europe. So that was a whole completely different agenda that were tailored because of whom I was living with and what was going on while I was in Australia. And that led to NOAA pulling out and all the American projects being shut down more or less until we kind of got into the whole 2018-19 where the AI began to take over. We had the dark galactic reconnection that is now gone because it has been pushed out, which is now diminishing the AI and Orion and dark forces, which is a good thing, at least here in Europe. So things change. So with that, that's also need to be understood when we work with ideas. Are they actually time dependent, these ideas, that they're not evergreen? Going into this whole, when I began making the material of 2017, where I made the course material, that's now out for free because it's still useful for people that are walking that different activation process. Is still useful as the beginning step, but it's not how we're working now. So in a manner you say, well, is it then okay to have it out there for non-payment? Well, I could have non-payment or only payment at all. And then there wouldn't be anyone who could begin and look into some of these ideas, study my books, and then get some free material that would push them a little bit further so that they are ready to go the next step. As in the question always asked, are you ready to go the next step? That came from my own teaching system in my own activation process. So I had a timer, which is so with some of the projects in NOAA as well. They had timers built in that would activate them when certain events happened. And that's kind of how it's been with me as well. But then there's been all the modifications, different programs, and went to Australia and the whole shit show that happened down there with the different factions and what I was pulled in and what was done to me and the re-engineering, which is why I ended up with NOAA pulling out and leaving me to the circumstances I had chosen in Australia, which was a choice I did as well. Remember when they said, do you want to do this? And I said, yes, I want to do this. Do you sure you want to do this? Because it's not going to go well. I said, yeah, I want to do this because I wanted the dream of Australia. I wanted to be in Australia where the sun was shining, with my friend that was down there, with some of the groups that she was working with, and all of what was offered there, which then later on turned to collapse beneath our feet because whatever that was offered were actually based upon something that was not congruent with who she was and who I was, but that was some of the programs she was under that felt to be the right approach to things, but then later on turned out, yeah, it's not. And while these groups that she had worked with thought that I could be of service to them, so to speak, and my genetics would fill up their different types of harvesting potentials, well, it turned out that my genetics were not really doing what they wanted to do. And as they turned me darker and darker, I began activating what we call the releaser potentials, which came as a little bit of a big surprise because they thought, oh, we can use this. And then suddenly they were in this shitstorm with me where we were battling and fighting and all of these struggles. And the more they were pumping me up with whatever they wanted to do, the more I turned into this complete eraser, equalizer, releaser, prototype where it kicked off the original super soldier program that had been dormant. So that was something else that then came into play, and nobody saw that one coming. That's also why when I was doing part of the AI wars with some of the military projects down there, and they finally discovered, yeah, you can be useful here while we're battling off these Orion forces, but the ones that were coming in, they were not interested in what I was. So that's why, as I said, other places in 2019, when I left, I got the clear message, you're no longer welcome. And it had been on its way for a long time. They kind of, with these factions, they're kind of, yeah, we can use you for this, but once we're done with this, you're of no use to us, and then they kick you out. So that's kind of how it is with these different alignments, right? They use you as long as they can, and once they're done with whatever they need you for, they kind of, yeah, but we have other plans where you don't fit in, because clearly you are a little bit of a threat to us. You're public enemy number one, right? Anyway, so that's also part of when we do begin these projects. Sometimes we have the grand ideas of this is something I really want. I mourned the loss of what she and I could have been doing in Australia for a long time. It was this grand idea that were offered, the school, the communities, the nature, the land, the experience, the excitement, the different things from Denmark. Everything is gray here, still is. And coming down to Australia, everything, the sun was shining all the time. Where we lived to begin with, people were healthy. I was just blossoming. It was just kind of, yay, finally. And then it all been taken away from you overnight. That feeling again, I got this. No, you don't, because someone else is deciding for you. So I think that's important to put in here as well. When we do talk about our own projects, that if we do choose somehow to align with something that's out there or some other group, which you have heard me talk about many, many times, because this is part of me. I'm allowed to do my own stuff. That's why I worked with the progression sciences, which is my stuff. And I said, I need to do this first. And then I had all the shitstorm going on while I was doing that, because they didn't really want me to do that. But I persevered and I got it done. And I'm very proud of the work I've done. It's very, very high quality. And with that, then suddenly, because I endured that and got that project out there, not because I wanted to earn money and not because I wanted to pay my bills with it, I saw that as a potential, but the purpose of it was under the councils. And as I worked more and more with that of the True Human Councils, other things came in, they pulled out, other stuff happened, but at least the teachings are there now. So that's also where we can say, well, that's the path out. That's a new version of the path out of the enclosure. So that has been delivered. That has been given, the choices there, which then takes me off the hook of being the teacher and then frees me up to do something else. So that's also important to understand, that our projects will change all the time. And once I'm done with the Changemaker material in 2023, then I will no longer go into work with business or hybrid projects or whatever. My plan is here now. I create the pillar of that information. People can study it. Then they have got what they need to get to that next step. And then I do the Forerunner material. Then I complete that one. And then people can get to that step. Then I do the systemic energetic awareness. Then I go into the Hope project that goes from 2024, the recalibration of males and females and what we are as humans inside this reality. And then once that is done, also working with the new reality construction, which is also being worked with now, but will shift further there, and then into the new types of sciences. So our projects must change according to what is in the zeitgeist. So that's important when we understand, when we're putting out projects, they will change. They're not evergreen. They are evergreen for a year or two, and then we will change, and then we must let it go. And you've seen me, how I just, right here at the end of 2022, I took down 100 podcasts on my Changemaker channel. Some of them were already unpublished, but had been taken away. But I deleted them completely because someone asked me, don't you just unpublish them and then keep them there? Well, I've done that with some of the material, but it felt like it was just a burden on my channel. I need to free it up. So I just erased them all, 100 podcasts. Well, you have a backup of them. No, erased it all. And I do that too with my thumb drive or my USB stick, because once it's done, it's done. And I'm not going to take some old material and revive it, because I have changed. Reality has changed. My energy system has changed. The teachings have changed. How I perceive reality has changed as you see me upgrade the information again and again. And that's where it comes in with agile projects, what I would say is the most, doable version of the projects that we are doing, the agile projects that are always in process, that are always under iteration, that is always in refinement. They're never really done. And until they are done, but they have gone through so many upgradings and so many iterations that they have really been made so sharp that they become pristine with the highest purity rate, the high standards, and the highest progression rate, because that goes with our projects as well. Not just us, but our projects, because our projects is an exemplification of who and what we are. That's enormously important to understand. So while you're in your working out the base program, the projects you will put in motion, the ideas you will get will be a hybrid between the base program and what you want to become. And then you work with that project and use it as a tool to progress yourself. So your projects are not just because you want to earn money. The projects is or help other people. The project is actually because you want to explore who and what you are. What are your capacities? What can you do with the project you put in motion? And that should be part of the idea that you come up with. What is the progression potentials in that idea? What can it lead to? What can you do with that idea? How can you progress from that idea? So we have that big thing, as in kind of, I still have that. I haven't found the solutions yet. But since I know so much about alien technology and the construction, all these kind of things, I still want to do some sort of disclosure, but it's not the disclosure of the alien agenda, because I feel that's covered and most of these races are gone anyways. But it is the disclosure of the workstation enhanced humans. And I know that they are working there. They want to go there, as we talked about in the previous podcast, but they don't know either. So this is still on the drawing board, so to speak. But how do I narrow down that idea? For instance, if we were to say, okay, I want to do, let's work with that one, because that's a little bit of a really mind brainer, as in kind of, okay, how do we then do this kind of brainstorm on that project? So we'll talk about that in the next podcast. Thank you.